to ask for a head count for this Thursday to go to the capital projects. Can we get a head count if people plan to go on the capital projects tour? Raise your hands if you're going to go. Way up so she can see them.
We're still meeting at 6 after that, right? Here?
Yes, we're meeting at 6 afterwards. That's at 4:30. Perfect, thank you. Chief, are you ready?
And Chair,
Okay.
Chair, we do have
Yeah,
Jason
I'm sorry, let's have an official roll call. Vanessa, who you are and that you're on the, you're a counselor.
Vanessa Auger, City Council.
Tammy Schmidt, Budget Committee.
Kirk Collins, City Council.
Josh Ballack, member of the public.
Rob Pell, City Council.
Trip Androy, Budget Committee, lay member.
Rick Riker, City Council.
Tom Brandis, Budget Committee.
Aaron Kubik, Budget Officer.
J.C. Rowley, Finance Director.
Joel King, City Council.
Tom Bradbeer, lay member.
Linda Barkey, lay member.
Gordon Langenbeck, lay member.
Okay, now we're ready. Thank you.
And Jason Jabarone, lay member.
Where's Jason? Oh, online, okay.
Virtual Jason.
Yes.
Ready when you are, Chair.
Oh, I'm ready.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. My name is Warren Hensman. I'm the Chief of Police. It's my pleasure to present the budget for the Police Department for fiscal 23. So agenda tonight, we're just going to go over some of the council goals as it pertains to the Police Department and some of the departmental and organizational goals that I think help lay some of the foundation as we go through tonight's budget presentation. I also have an extra handout for you all tonight, the department organizational structure. You'll notice that we have quite the robust organization and sometimes it can be tricky to follow along. So I decided just to make an extra handout, and as the pages come up tonight, it might be a little helpful as you guys navigate your way through tonight's presentation. Then I have a budget summary and then an agency overview, and then we'll end with a service level commitment and some summary topics. So, council goals, one of the most important goals for me is obviously to enhance community safety, and that involves a few things, and that's prevention, focused community policing to help reduce crime and build public trust. And the public trust piece, you'll notice, will be a theme as I go along my presentation. Also utilizing technology and social media to produce positive outcomes relative to the improvements in policing. Policing's evolving every single day, and there's some amazing best practices happening nationwide, and I like to think a lot of them are coming out of Grants Pass in Southern Oregon. So we'll talk about some of them along the way. And then, of course, to enhance a safe and secure environment. One of the things I did want to touch on is within the police organization and our command staff, we think it's incredibly important to follow, obviously, the strategic plan within the city, but also our own operational and departmental and structural movement towards a best practice. That includes 21st century policing. And a few years ago, the President's Commission on 21st Century Policing got together with a lot of police executives nationwide and came up with 6 pillars. They include building trust and legitimacy, we talk about that often, policy and oversight, technology and social media, community policing and crime reduction, training and education, which is very, very important, along with officer wellness and safety. The police department organizational structure, and you'll see that in front of you. It's also in your budget book on 130 and 134. But that handout I gave you really sums it all up, and you'll see it's a really robust organization. And it's broken down into a couple of sections: police operations and support. Under police operations, you'll see we have patrol, K-9, traffic, school resource officers, school marshals, community response team, investigations, task force, analysts, we have professional standards and accreditation, and the list goes on. I don't want to just read it directly from here, but you have a robust police organization, 24/7, 365 days a year, that love responding to calls for service for this community and supporting this community in their time of need. We wouldn't be able to do what we do responding to calls without our dispatch 911 center and our records division who support the organization. So as we continue to go through the presentation today, we'll talk about our dispatch center, which is the public safety answering points, that's PSAP for Josephine County, and our records team. And that's the handout I gave you all. I'm not going to keep that up on the screen, nor will I go over it, but it breaks down our 94 FTEs, and there's a little box in there that's called on call. And I wanted to share that with you all tonight because essentially that section accounts for about 29 people, if I can see it correctly from here. We have about $120 that we put aside for on-call employees, but that is typically for our dispatchers, our record specialists, and our evidence technicians, and then some trainers and some other additional duties, some auxiliary duties that support the organization. And I don't think I talk about it enough because I don't think there's too many organizations out there that have about 29 people kind of on standby for free. And we kind of do. These are people that have retired from the organization or have been linked to the organization in one way, shape, or form, and they really help the operation flow really smoothly. So I wanted to mention the on-call team tonight. Our police department executive summary, as you can see, last year's adopted budget was $17.8 million, and this year's recommended budget is going to be $19.3 million. And that's an increase of about $1.5 million. One of the things that we'll talk about as we go through the presentation, by far the majority of the cost right here are personnel costs. I've kept this budget incredibly flat when it comes to operations and contractual services. So the majority of this budget that you see in front of you and that particular increase, about 1.3 million of it across police and support, are for personnel and for several reasons that we'll talk about. But more specifically, PERS increases, healthcare costs, negotiations, adding one additional police officer back. If you recall, last year we froze 2 police officers. And then we also have a hefty retirement payout this year with a long-term employee. So that kind of speaks to a lot of that increase. This additional summary slide behind me just gives you that additional breakdown from adopted to recommended budget. And as you can see, the increases in each section from police operations, dispatch and records, crisis support, and sobering. And also it's important for me to include and share that the overall budget for the police department, that 19 million, includes our crisis support and includes our sobering center. And frankly, we would be lost without them. They provide an amazing service to this community. For some of the counselors in the room, you might notice that that crisis support number looks a wee bit low. All that indicates is an updated contract. I was able to work with Women's Crisis Support Team just so there is a updated MOU in place that doesn't add cost of living increases that we had before. Continuing on with our police operations executive summary, you can see the increase right there on the personnel services, $1.2 million. Materials and supplies, about $40,000 different, an increase. And then contractual and professional services, direct charges, indirect charges, and so on down the list. So you can see right off the bat that this budget is incredibly flat, especially with the cost of living increases that have occurred and that we're living right now in this new era of budgeting and economics. Moving on to our support services. I know you all know we have a 911 communication center. It's an interagency dispatch center, and it houses the Josephine County Public Safety Answering Point. We dispatch for police, fire and for AMR. We call take, and we also have a 911 agency manager contract that is within the organization. Within our records section, they do a lot also. And as I go quickly through this, I also want to make sure that if anybody's watching out there, this is the backbone of the organization right here. Our 911 center and our records team, they do a heck of a lot of work, and we'd be lost without them. The records staff take non-emergency calls. They enter warrants, they process cases, crash entries, citations, report requests, and then everything else that's not listed there. They're very busy. On the support side of the house, you'll see that the personnel services increase was not that much in comparison. It's about $100,000 increase. Materials and supplies, we had some savings this year. We were able to chip away at that a little bit. Contractual and professional services, that's not much of an increase with the technology that they support within the 911 center. And then the indirect charges through administration and IT kind of round out the numbers there. Our crisis support services, it's on page 135 and 136 of your, in your handouts in the book. But one thing that I do want to share, the domestic violence in Southern Oregon is increasing. Domestic violence in Grants Pass, unfortunately, is increasing. In fact, I took a look at our numbers today, and when you compare data between this time last year and then moving forward from January to now, it's a significant increase in domestic violence assaults. We're doing a lot of work behind the scenes to try to have some sort of an impact. The biggest concern I had last year leading into the holiday was that we make it through 2021 literally without domestic homicide, and thank goodness we did. But it's always a concern for me, and it's always a concern for our women's crisis support team. As you can see from that data, it's a lot, so they're very busy and there's a lot going on. And that doesn't include the men and women and children that are out there that haven't quite found their voice yet. So it's our goal to try to get people to report so we can provide either a service and or some sort of a criminal investigation. And then our sobering center. Sobering center has been around since about 2000, or should I say, the idea came about in 2012, operational since 2016. These numbers become increasingly larger year after year. We're kind of flat with those numbers, but those numbers are incredibly high. As you can see, 588 from Grants Pass Police Department last year. That's a big number. It's encouraging to see the number of self-admits. However, I think there's a large population in those self-admits that are probably just looking for some shelter, and they have kind of, I'm not going to say they're game on the system. They do need help. But we do have a lot of people that come in for self-admits. The good news is on their way out the door, we try to engage with them and encourage services. So our service level commitment, you have a robust organization within the police department, within police and 911 and support services. And our commitment is to provide a full service law enforcement patrol, criminal investigations, and narcotics task force participation. We're changing how we do things in the narcotics task force world because we're essentially changing with some of the laws that have been handed down with ballot measure 110 and some other legislation that has been pushed our way that we have no choice but to just live with it essentially. But we're committed to the people of Grants Pass, and we'll do everything we can to stop narcotics from coming up the I-5 corridor, which it comes up the I-5 corridor and down on a regular basis. But if we can stop them from coming into Grants Pass, Josephine County, and Jackson County, and Douglas County for that matter, we're going to continue to protect our kids and the citizens of this city. We actually just stopped 5,000 pills coming into the city recently, and they were fentanyl pills, and that is not good at all. I think everybody's pretty familiar with what fentanyl is doing to communities across the United States. But we will continue to partner with our partner organizations, essentially. One of them is Options for Southern Oregon that we have just started a new partnership with. In fact, a team member from Options is now working with the Grants Pass Police Department in an embedded capacity that individual will be out there on patrol with our community response team downtown in the parks. So when we're working on the enforcement side, this person will be working on directing the individual into the service side. It's a team effort. I'm not sure why it hasn't been done years ago, but I think we might be the first in Oregon to actually have somebody embedded within the organization. So that has happened. So we're super excited about that. This person is only with us part-time right now until Options for Southern Oregon can fill her position, because she has a dedicated position that also needs filled on the Options side of the house. But that is exciting, and we feel we're going to be able to help our community members as we navigate our way through the challenges of 2022. We now have parking enforcement throughout the city, and that is going pretty well. Our school resource officers and our school marshal program continues to be stellar. We have the only school marshal program in the state. I'm not sure if there's even a school marshal program anymore in the United States, which often surprises me. But for those of you that don't know what the school marshal program is, basically retired police officers that are paid through District 7, not the city, and they're in plain clothes and they're in our schools. And it's phenomenal. It's phenomenal to have them. Quick example, a few days ago, you might have noticed armed robbery down on Williams Highway at the Oasis. Shot was fired, and the kids at Allendale were doing the jog-a-thon, literally 350 feet away. Our school marshals were there, our school resource officer happened to be there, and we were able to contain that scene almost immediately and put them into a lockout situation. But it's really fantastic to have those folks on staff. We will continue to do the intelligent-led briefing that I brought to the organization a few years ago. It's starting to really gain some speed and generate some enthusiasm in the organization. Essentially, it's my way of holding myself and my department accountable to trends. That trend could be anywhere from sobering center lodgings to crime to domestic violence to livability issues, and we have a lot of them in this community. So we talk about it, and nobody can hide, and we come up with solutions and action plans, and it's important. We also put this on a dashboard on the website, or portions of it, so our community can follow along with what we're trying to do. Obviously, it's important to maintain adequate police officer staffing levels. In this budget proposal, we're asking for one of the 2 frozen police officers back, and that will definitely help the community response team mission and the overall mission of the organization. Livability and nuisance crime focus and online reporting expansion is something that we will continue to work on. Short presentation this year. I was trying to knock it down a little bit because I figured there'd be plenty of questions. But just in summary, your police officers, our police officers, community service officers, record specialists, support personnel, dispatchers, and volunteers, they do an outstanding job, and we're in challenging times. We will remain forward-thinking to be successful, but also to manage the cost while we deliver, I think, some of the best services that Oregon sees in a police agency. That is my presentation. I'll open it up for any questions.
Does anybody have questions for the chief? Go ahead.
2 of them. The debt service, I presume, is to pay off the public safety building, the $500,000?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, second question is, I know NBA teams use analytics. How are you using analytics?
Could you say the first part again? I didn't hear the first part.
Well, what forms of analytics are you using in the police department?
Yeah, that's a great question, because data is king. If you're not taking a look at your data on the regular, you're missing the boat. And sometimes if you don't read the data correctly, you're going to miss the boat too. We happen to have a crime analyst on staff that works through a conglomerate of policing tools, software packages, everything from our CAD system to our different records management systems to different LexisNexis models, just different sources of information that we can gather to paint a picture. And the crime analyst we have on staff is currently working, I think she's working on her PhD, but she's also working on a certification that only a couple of hundred people have nationwide. It's a really tough exam. So it usually takes a couple of tries for people to pass this. But I'm confident she'll pass this in the next year or two, and we'll have a real professional crime analyst on our hands. And at our price point, I think that's pretty good. So I'm afraid we'll lose her after that. But she mines the data, she sends it to us, and we utilize that data through the intelligence-led briefing, but also just through crime stats on a monthly basis, so we can dig through it. In an organization of our size, we only have 40,000 people. Our county's not that large. It's not that difficult to dissect information, to identify trends. For example, as I go through the numbers, it's really easy to see, and this was anticipated, that now that COVID is in our rearview mirror, burglaries are going this way. Burglaries are going on the rise. So that just means people are going back to work, leaving their houses empty, and the criminal element are moving in. We anticipated that, so we're starting to see that. But I also have been watching the analytics with our domestic violence. That's a tricky one to figure out, because you have to take a look at not just assault rates, but domestic violence assault rates and the different tiers of assaults. And then you try to identify what's going on within the home. And a lot of people do not want to come to the forefront and look for services. So it can be tricky, but that's something we use. So I hope that answered the question for you.
Other questions? Vanessa?
The freezing of that officer position was done to balance the budget in FY22. So I'm curious for FY23 if that will provide any complications, and where did those funds come from to bring back that position?
To my knowledge, I don't think it's going to complicate too much. The city manager and I reviewed what I was trying to accomplish through this year with the finance manager, and we didn't think we were going to have any issues with it, and I don't think so right now, unless city manager would like to make a comment on that.
Yeah, the decision to move forward with the 1 FTE in police was in alignment with council's strategic plan and level of service discussion, keeping citizens safe, including, which you'll hear later on today, 2 parks FTE associated with keeping people safe in the parks and within the community. Adding FTE, especially in the general fund, never comes lightly, and it comes definitely with the direction of council establishing the level of service. In order to bring forward a balanced budget, we had to really look internally to make sure that that was something that would work and be sustainable throughout the current levy period. And we addressed that with the finance and determined that we do still have a healthy fund when it comes to the reserve account in the general fund. And sitting at 35%, we do believe that and there's no doubt, adding FTE to general fund will provide an additional burden, and you really have to consider, is that an acceptable level, and will you be able to maintain your financial parameters? We do believe at the end of the levy term that we will still be in within the 30 to 40%, and that is going to provide us an opportunity to meet the level of service that council has requested coming forward, along with meeting the financial guidelines that is established, although there's still going to need to be a continued discussion at the council level with regards to more permanent sustainable funding that also matches the level of service that the community has grown to desire and has benefited from, because as we mentioned earlier, the general fund is subsidizing additional funds above and beyond all property taxes to support police, fire, support services.
I would also piggyback on what city manager just presented to you all tonight too. We are pretty tight with our budget. In fact, we're always looking at our budget. And the police department, formerly the public safety department, always returns a lot of money in the millions, 1.2 million, I believe, last year. And I think we're about, Adam and JC might be giving me a glare in a minute, but I think we're about 76, 77% spent, and we're in May. So I think that's pretty good. So we're way under budget as anticipated. And the philosophy is if we don't have to spend it, we don't, because we know that ending fund balance carries over and certainly supports the general fund to maintain the city's mission. Because it's not just about the police department, it's about the city's mission. And keeping the city's budget whole is something we're all interested in doing.
Vanessa?
Yeah, follow-up. Are you in a position to speak about what that new FTE, what they would be doing, what their assignment would be?
I am in a position to speak about that. You notice the smile came right back to my face. I also think it's important to share with council and the budget committee that in a perfect world, I would be able to overhire staff. Currently, we're trying to train several police officers, so our teams are still short. It takes sometimes over a year to hire and train police officers, and that's if they make it. That is also inclusive for our dispatch center as well. Dispatchers do not typically make it through the training, especially dispatchers with the Grants Pass Police Department, because it's not just call taking, it's EMS, it's fire, and it's police. So there's a lot going on for that emergency dispatcher, as I know you know that. Once we get everybody trained up and I feel that I'm able to deploy resources appropriately to provide the best services to the community, I'm going to beef up the community response team. So currently we have 2. So then I want to have 3 community response team police officers. And there are officers you see downtown in the parks. That's my goal.
Other questions? Go ahead, Josh.
So could you, or I guess maybe staff, what was the projected budget in 22 for 23? Do you guys have that number, or could you provide that later?
Can you clarify?
So in 2021, when you were projecting for 2023, when you were doing the budget, what was the projected number? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I think it was somewhere around the $26 million range, but we had to cut a lot of staffing. I don't have that number right in front of me, but yeah, I'm absolutely tracking where you're coming from.
All right, thank you. And then how much does the police, you kind of started to answer, how much does the police department and support operations usually not spend in an average year? Is it usually around $1 million, or is it more or less?
Yeah, it's usually around $1 million. This is the new year. We're no longer a public safety department, so we split police from fire. But I will maintain the police department and 911 services, which is the bulk of that public safety organization. I would estimate this year we'll probably be very close to $1 million. Like I mentioned, I just look at our projections and we're about 76% spent. We find that to be very important. And from the fire side of the house, I don't have too many of those numbers in front of me, but I think fire's tracking at about 78, 79% spent currently. So I still kind of keep an eye on those numbers. Sorry, Randy, I can't help it.
No, and that's kind of helpful because I feel that's kind of built into the budget. So that's good to know. And then the final piece is more, I guess, kind of a comment. I'm really excited to hear that you are embedding behavioral health inside of the police department. And I really do see an opportunity to expand this type of program. There is a ton of federal dollars that is circulating, including Ron Wyden, who is very much trying to push this nationally. So I think there's some federal leverage that you could do, but I also do believe there's a ton of state dollars that we may be able to make this a sustainable model at some level. So kudos to you for including it, and I think we may, as a city, want to build this into a long-term plan as going forward.
Yeah, thanks. And I just want to make sure to clarify, this person is not a behavioral health specialist per se. This person is classified as a case manager who does have certain credentials that will work. This person will work with my staff, and we actually met today as we kind of etched out the pathway, and it's going to be pretty phenomenal, I think, for our community. Thank you.
Go ahead. Tripp?
Yeah, so obviously a run up in personnel expenses, which is typical. I guess what I'm most interested in, though, with regards to that is, so in your operations division, the run up is about 12% over 2022, and then in the support division is about 3%. You know, you can back out maybe 2% for the additional FTE in the operations division, but that still is a 10% versus 3% run up. what are the causes of that?
Yeah, cops are expensive. That's the cause of that. PERS cost increases, contract negotiations, insurance, healthcare. It's expensive. We also have a retiree coming up that's been on board for 25 years. That's going to be an expensive carve out as well. So that's typically the difference right there, if that makes sense.
Okay, so then maybe this is more of a question for management then. I mean, if there's a specific retiree in the department that is a material portion of that bridge, like how has that just not been something we've been paying PERS premiums for the past?
No, it has to do with payouts. So we have 3 different tiers in Oregon. We have tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. Tier 3 would be called OPSERP. The tier 3 is, let's consider that reform. Tier 1 and tier 2 are a little bit different. So tier 1 and tier 2 employees, they're your folks that have been on for an awful long time. They have certain buyouts, and the city is responsible for paying out those individuals upon retirement. That could be vacation, that could be sick time, things like that.
Yeah, that makes a lot more sense. And then you mentioned bargaining units. So is the support division in a different bargaining unit than the operations division?
No, they're not. So the dispatchers are within the Grants Pass Police Association unit.
Okay. Cool.
Go ahead, Tammy.
So of the PERS amount that's in the $1.5 million increase, is that related to the $2 million PERS that was presented to us on day one?
I don't know that answer. I might have to ask Aaron for that. I wasn't here for the first presentation.
No, that would be separate.
And you're probably, it's kind of coming back to me. You're talking about apples and oranges a little bit different. So I'm just providing you the expenses within my organization, and to share with you some of those increases aren't just salary, it's also those increased PERS costs as well.
Other questions? Tom?
Looking at the increase over really the last 2 years, it's fairly modest. And I'm curious if this is the real fiscal year 24. Are there any holes left in service level from the police department? Is this going to fill it?
No, there's holes, and I was waiting for that question to come up because as a manager and an executive within the organization, I look at these numbers and I wonder, what am I missing? Because that should be going up significantly, especially with cost of living increases and what we're seeing happening nationwide. We've kept this budget incredibly flat. Personnel obviously are the biggest expense within the organization, but in a perfect world, I could work on my real-time crime center and I could deploy more technology. I do have a goal to build out a real-time crime center that would involve probably staffing, but more importantly, we would be able to deploy drones from our building. We would be able to have complete access to all of our audio and visual capabilities within the city. That includes cameras on posts, that includes cameras on bodies, and that includes cameras on cars. So when we have a critical incident, like the one we just had a couple weeks at JCC, we can immediately deploy these resources and evaluate what we have before we go into it. Because protecting life is the #1 goal. And if you did notice some of the write-ups from that, there was a young man holding a young woman hostage with a broken glass knife to her throat. So having technology at our fingertips is paramount as we move forward. But I do have holes in that budget that I hope to plug as we move forward, but I have to be a good steward of the dollars. And I think right now, for what I have available to spend, we can give the citizens a good product.
Other questions? Go ahead, Gordon.
One more. How do you continue to evaluate the number of police officers versus CSOs? Because as you know, there's an amazing difference in cost.
Yeah, that's a great question because sometimes we overload our CSOs. So for those of you that don't know the acronym, our community service officers, they're non-sworn. They handle things like traffic crashes, recover property. They can enforce municipal code, parking enforcement as well. So they do have incredible value. And especially now with our livability concerns that we're noticing, for example, drug houses, I can think of a couple off the top of my head. I'm not going to throw out an address right now. But if we had more CSOs to work on our livability problems, you wouldn't see as much graffiti around town. You wouldn't see shopping carts around town. You wouldn't see blight-ridden homes. We'd have more of an opportunity to take advantage of those additional CSOs, but we just don't have the availability to hire more. But then also, too, you have to ask yourself, we're dealing with an increased level of crime, and CSOs just cannot investigate domestic violence. They just cannot respond to burglaries, and that's kind of the crux we live in. But also, too, Gordon, if you remember our cadet program, we should have a couple more cadets hired on. That's kind of like I hate to say the JV league, but they're younger people that want to be police officers, that want to be community service officers, and we're preparing them for their future. And they do good work as well. So much lower price point, and we can get them down in the parks. We can get them doing different enforcement activities throughout our community. And that's something that I plug and play as well. Cadets, CSOs, police officers, and then the non-sworn team to round it out.
Other questions? Go ahead, Josh.
All right, I'm going to ask the hard question here. So, we tried to pass a $1.89 public safety levy, and I realized that that's both you and fire. That didn't happen. We ended up going back to a $1.79. At what point do you see the breaking point where you can't live at 179, or that it's a place where that is not sustainable, or you're going to start to see massive cuts or substantial cuts that actually weaken service?
So you're talking about the 179?
Correct.
It's already happened. We're there. We've been there for years. Our fire department is way short. Our police department are way short. I could use 10 cops tomorrow, and we'd be super busy. We're short, and we're just putting our finger in the dam to keep the dam from cracking all the way through. So we're pretty busy. Our cops are wore out. Our firefighters are wore out. And we're losing officers too. We're losing firefighters. They're going elsewhere. They're going to organizations that are better funded. And we're working pretty hard, so we got to work on that morale piece, which we do all the time. We always try to increase the morale and the wellness within organizations. But there comes a time where some have hit a breaking point. I've had officers that are 5-year cops walk in and say, "Chief, I love you, but I'm going to go work for my dad." Or I'm moving to Tennessee. Or I'm moving to Texas. Seems like everybody's moving to Tennessee. And on our fire department side, it is what it is. We have organizations poaching our firefighters. Grants Pass Fire Rescue do a great job. And then you've got Medford, you've got District 3, District 5. When they recruit, they pay more. And if our firefighters and officers are feeling wore out, there's a potential we could lose them.
And the example that shows that we truly have hit that point is a year and a half ago, council had to take a look at and do an exercise to cut almost $2 million out of the budget in order to balance it to maintain the $1.79. So that is an activity that will likely have to occur again at some level at the end of this current levy year, unless this current levy cycle, unless we come up with a different type of revenue stream or change the level of service.
Can follow up, okay?
Yeah.
So I guess that's kind of the second question that I had here is, how do I put this the right way? Past this prologue, you might be stuck at a $1.79 maybe for another 2 cycles. What is it that you're kind of looking at ways to be able to mitigate the impact of that? What are the investments that you are ready to make or changes that you foresee in the next 2, 3, 4 years to be able to try to do more with less?
Yeah, I see where you're going with this, and you're absolutely right. I have to figure out ways to do more with less. Online reporting is the first thing that comes to mind, and that's the easy one that comes to mind. But also, too, then it takes away the personal touch that our community deserves, and they don't get a police officer showing up at the doorstep. They get told to go online and fill out the vehicle theft report or the fraud or the forgery. That's exactly where we're going to go. So we move towards that big city enforcement, model versus what I think the community needs. Because what happens when you do more online reporting versus in-person reporting, you miss a lot. You miss basic questions. And also too, you catch fraud as well. So some people will complete an online report for a hit and run, and they might live in a county and say it happened at Walmart, and that wasn't the case. And they send it off to their insurance company. So there's a lot of different reasons there too. Well, and then also too, you just have to kind of cut service response too, which is the last thing we want to do. Then response times would increase and it gets troubling. But the one thing I'll tell you, and I'm not a doom and gloom person, you have amazing police officers, you have amazing staff, and they work hard. Sometimes they work 6-7 days a week. We force rotate them back to work all the time, and they work 12-hour shifts too, so don't forget that piece. So you have a dedicated crew, and we try to maintain that positive, upbeat morale, the image of the organization, and keep it fresh. And we let the guys and the men and women just lead by their own imagination and how they can serve this community, and I think we're doing a good job.
That's not very cheery. Okay, other questions?
Do have an answer to the previous question. So based on the fiscal year 22 budget and the fiscal year 23 projection, it's about $770,000 less in that budget. So it would have been about $18.6 million in the fiscal year 22 for the fiscal year 23 projected number.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief. Okay. Are you ready? Deputy Chief DeLong for the fire department and others.
Ready?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Good evening, Budget Committee, council members, community. Thank you for having us here to be able to go through the budget. I'm excited to present to you our proposed budget for fiscal year 23. I'm Randy DeLong, Deputy Chief for Grants Pass Fire Rescue. We're going to talk a little bit about the department overview, organization, council and departmental goals, budget summary, and then we'll go into the questions that you have. So our fire operations, basically for Grants Pass Fire Rescue, we have two divisions. We've got our operational side, suppression, all hazard response, and then we've got our fire prevention side. We have 3 stations, staffed 24/7, 365 days a year. We respond to structural wildland fires. If it's on fire, we're going to respond and do our best to keep it small, mitigate the hazard. We have basic life support is our medical level of training, what we respond to. We also have intermediate, advanced, and some paramedics that will supplement and increase that level at times. Vehicle extrications, where we go to and use equipment to both extricate and help the person get out of the vehicle, but also providing medical service at the same time. We have technical rescue team, and our technical rescue team's main support or focus is actually confined space rescue. With that, they do a lot of work, and so they also are very highly trained in rope rescue and then can assist over into the water rescue operations as well. We have a student firefighter program. Currently, that used to be 9 positions. We're currently down to 3. We've done that to reduce some funding, but we're also revamping the program, reviewing it. That program was very hard to maintain the number that we had at night for several years now. So we're just trying to refigure out what can we do to get that number up and kind of have an edge on the other programs around Southern Oregon. There's many programs that modeled after ours in the mid-2000s. We have engine company business inspections. So even though that our folks are suppression and they're responding to 911 calls, they're also out there actively engaged to help prevent fires. So they go out to the businesses, walk through the businesses, and make sure that we're looking for anything that might cause fire or life safety issues so that we can be on the preventive side rather than the suppression side. We'd much rather prevent the fire from happening. We work with Grants Pass PD. We have SWAT medics that are assigned to their SWAT team. They not only bring their medical knowledge and training that they have from the EMS side for our department, but they also have advanced level training in tactical care and combat. So they can bring that over there and help them in those times. Our Fire Prevention Bureau, small group, they do a lot, and they're also assisted a lot from our suppression side, as I mentioned. They do fire and life safety education, so part of that would be the Grants Pass High School Student Safety Academy, careers program that the high school has, the child car seat program or safety program, which is often mainly done by our suppression folks in the station. People drop by and we check their car seats out, and can't tell you how often we find that their car seats are actually incorrectly installed. So it's an amazing program to benefit our community. CPR Anytime program. That's where we're going out and we're teaching people to push hard, push fast. When someone goes into cardiac arrest, CPR done immediately with a quick call to 911 has a huge difference in the outcome. And so training our community to be able to recognize that situation and provide CPR is huge. Fire investigations. Fire investigation is actually one of those unique things. We're actually required by law to investigate all the fires that we have within our city limits. And that whole goal is so that we can work on preventing the fires, both on the national level and finding things that may be wrong with appliances or devices for recalls, but then also locally looking what can we do to ramp up prevention and education components if we've got a specific area we want to address. Building plans reviews, we work with the building department and make sure all the buildings that are coming through are up to code and fire safe. Fire code enforcement, if there's issues or complaints about a concern for fire code, we have our officers that will go out there and ensure that the businesses or event or whatever is going on is actually up to fire code. Fire and life safety inspections. Our engine companies do this in the businesses, but our Fire Prevention Bureau also does it. And they specifically look at those higher hazard occupancies, our restaurants, large gathering assemblies, those type of buildings, and go in there and make sure that they're all up to speed. Rogue Valley Integrated Fire Plan, Cohesive Wildland Fire Strategy Partner, and even a fire prevention co-op that we're part of. So it's not just us here within the city of Grants Pass. We actually are very heavily involved throughout Southern Oregon in Jackson and Josephine County, working together so we can help prevent fires and be better stewards of our wildland. And last but not least on this one, our FireWise communities. We currently have Rick McClintock. He's actually a grant-funded position. In association, we work with the county on that. He's funded into fiscal year 23, and he goes out and works on getting our communities together, kind of like a crime prevention, but focused on wildland fire prevention. Department organization. So we currently have the fire chief position that is vacant. We're in the middle process of going out for that recruitment. Hopefully we'll get it filled here very soon. My position for the deputy fire chief. Then we have our 3 battalion chiefs. Our 3 battalion chiefs are kind of running dual duty. They're both running, one's running operations, but is also in charge of the shift. The other's running a training section in charge of his shift. And the third is the admin chief, but also is in charge of their shift. Beneath them, we've got 3 lieutenants for each shift, 3 engineers, and 2 firefighters, and as mentioned, 1 fire student. Over in our Fire Prevention Bureau, we've got the fire marshal. Beneath him, we've got the fire inspector, fireways coordinator, and then our fire prevention assistant. So council goals. So for us, enhancing community safety is again our #1 focus and priority. Part of that, and we're looking at doing, is develop an urban interface wildfire resilience plan. There's a lot going on in that area at the state level, and so we'll be moving forward with that. Fire Rescue Division internal restructure. We started that with a separation from public safety, going out for the fire chief, and we'll continue that as we get a fire chief on board and see what other things that we can do to provide better service to the community. And the last one is a Hillcrest Station study, and it has to do with a remodel of our Hillcrest Fire Station. So for our fire rescue goals, the following are a list of internal goals that we have. Internal and external training and education. COVID over the last 2 years has actually shut down a lot of the training and education opportunities that we had been going on. We are really looking forward to coming out of COVID and being able to go back out, get our folks to training, and continue with focusing on helping our community get the best service that we possibly can. Operational improvements, we're always looking and reviewing what can we do operationally to improve. Prevention, again, being one of the prime focuses, as I mentioned earlier. If we can prevent this stuff from happening, we're in a better situation than having to respond to it. Improve efficiencies through technology. There's so much advancement with technology, and we just want to make sure that we're staying on the leading edge of that and keeping up and improving wherever we can. And safety and wellness of our employees. Our firefighters, the men and women who serve this community, they're our heart and backbone of our agency. And so we want to make sure that we're taking care of them. We're making sure their needs are met so that they can actually continue to provide the excellent service we do. So, our fire rescue executive summary for the budget. Fiscal year 22, we were on $7.5 million. Fiscal year 23, we're at 8.4. Shows a budget change of just around 900,000, which is about 12%. Just so everyone knows, I know last week we talked a little bit about the AFG grant, the 3 firefighter positions that we're going for. So that 12% actually includes the 330,000 for those positions. When you actually remove that, that drops us down to about 7.6% increase this year. Again, just looking from fiscal year 21 at 7.7 to 22 at 7.5 to fiscal year 23 8.4 and projected for 24 at 8.8. Going down, personnel services, no surprise, it's going to be our biggest increase again. A lot of the same reasons that you already heard from Chief Hensman, but contract negotiations, personnel costs, PERS, those are the things that are really affecting us. But also to remember, out of that 700,000 there, about 330 of it is the AFG grant dollars that are assigned to that. Materials and supplies, we've kept those pretty flat. We've just got some increases in services goods. As everybody knows, some costs of materials and things have gone up. Contractual professional services, 33,000. Down a little bit on the capital outlay. We've got the indirect charges for administration, IT, and then the transfer to cap and land and buildings. And again, I know last week you guys went over the fact that we've got $100,000 looking to go to Parkway to get some maintenance that is desperately needed to be done on that building. So that again is a total of 909, which again 330 of that is the AFG dollars. Summary. You know, our firefighters and prevention personnel are doing an outstanding job during challenging times. We have got some excellent men and women that service our community. When I go out and look at what we do on a daily basis and some of the challenges that we've actually faced over the last 2 years, I can't be more proud of how they rise to the occasion and how they always give 110% every time they come to work and every call that they go on. We also will continue to reevaluate our services, looking to improve and enhance community safety while managing costs. We want to try to find every way that we can to improve our efficiency and just continue with that focus of enhancing our community safety. With that, questions?
Thank you. Questions? Go ahead, Gordon.
This probably isn't for you, but for someone who's a longer history here. About 5 years ago, there was all kinds of hullabaloo about the Hillcrest Fire Station was about ready to fall down and it was terrible, blah, blah, blah. Why are we just now running a study if it was that bad that long ago?
So the Hillcrest Station has actually gone, I went through a study before on what should we do as far as an upgrade. It's been just budgeting dollars as far as being able to find the funds to go through and do the remodel of it. It's still in desperate need of the remodel. It's still one of the priorities that we have as we're moving forward.
And how much money is in the current budget for that remodel in this coming fiscal year?
Should have around, I think it's $50,000 to start looking at going out to get the actual work done to redrawn, to basically redo it, and then look at possibly doing it in a phased-in study, or phased-in method.
I think Aaron's looking for the answer to that. In the meantime, unless you got it. Tom?
My question is also about capital outlay, and I don't see enough in here to buy a new engine, and I suspect that you have a schedule for replacement of engines. Is there a sinking fund or an amortization account to help accomplish that, or how do you deal with purchases of a new engine?
Yeah, so we actually do have funds that are available for purchasing new engines. That is done with Jason over there. His department actually deals with those funds for us, and we currently have one scheduled coming up this next July 1. So, yes.
And that will be discussed during Thursday night's presentation.
You okay with that? Okay. Other questions? Vanessa?
I understand mutual aid is necessary for fire in the Rogue Valley. In reading the budget, it highlights many out-of-area mutual aid responses that Grants Pass Fire has done. And my concern is with our low staffing numbers, it leaves our community vulnerable and at risk. So knowing that, how can we help mitigate that potential risk for our own community?
Well, one of the things is going for the AFG grant. So as we're increasing staffing, that's always going to help put us in a better situation. One of the other parts to look for is mutual aid is, yes, we do go outside and help other agencies quite a bit, but there's a return. So when we have a significant issue or a significant event going on, we're going to pull the mutual aid and we're going to actually bring in resources from outside the area. And sometimes I feel actually very amazed. We've got 3 units and they're staffed with minimum staffing of 2 person each. But those agencies that are sending us help are oftentimes staffed with 1 unit. Illinois Valley Fire, Rogue River Fire, they're sending us their only unit that they have available in their system when we ask for help. And so in return for when they ask for help, we're happy to go over there and help them and provide that service.
You have it. Aaron has an answer to your question.
Yeah, to go back to that first question, under LB 6398 on page 141 of your capital book, we do have a projected $50,000 for engineering study portion for Hillcrest, so we can address the deficiencies in the building in the most efficient way possible.
So that study will scope it?
Yes.
And then go.
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Other questions? Oh, go ahead, Josh.
I'm just a little curious. Contractual professional services, it's $1.1 million. Could you give an example of what exactly that is?
I can. So we actually have a lot of technology services that we have. So at least 62,000 of that is going to go through different types of programs and technologies that we have available that we utilize. Continuing on down, we've got a bunch of service equipment, rentals, repair. We've got radio maintenance that we're actually adding this year that we've never had before. Training, our training program, utility, machines for maintenance. And then when you go in, we've got landscaping, we've got janitorial services, all the different stations. So having the 3 different stations itself does actually add a significant amount of services that you may not see in some of the other places that we're in charge of.
Well, I thought you just made the rookies cut the grass. That was the whole point, right? I do want to follow up on one thing, though, and you kind of mentioned it on training. At the end of the day, we do live in a really dangerous area where there's a lot of wildfire. We watched, 2 of our neighboring towns burn down, basically. Have you guys planned out and budgeted kind of a uniformed response program for, like, if there is a mega fire that is heading our direction or something along those lines, what that response will look like, how you guys are going to end up working with other fire departments, really preparing for that? Or has this been kind of the thing where we haven't quite got there yet?
So we actually, on the forefront of wildland response, we've been working for years very closely with Oregon Department of Forestry, the Rogue Valley Fire Chiefs as a whole, to ensure that we can send and adequately staff as best as we possibly can all the fires and keep them small. I think in 2018 was probably one of the best examples. When the lightning fires took off in 2018, it quickly overwhelmed ODF's ability. And because of our close ties, our relationships, and actually the training that we had done, we were responding to fires and managing fires. In fact, the most notable one was probably I-5 at milepost 53 up on the knob. Second time that burned. I was the first one to get up there on scene. I requested and to ask what ODF resources I had available. They responded with, we have nobody available to respond. We immediately initiated over a full callback between us and Rural Metro. And even though that's outside of the city limits of Grants Pass, we know what the smoke impact does to our business and our tourism dollars. And we also know that just the proximity to our community could, with the wrong wind, pose a significant threat really quickly. So we send as much of resources as we can, and we just try to overwhelm our fires as fast as we can. When you get to a situation like Alameda and a wind event, and we had units over there, sometimes you are at the hand of Mother Nature and just waiting for what we can do and for things to die down so we can actually get in there and take some good action.
Thank you. Questions? More questions? Lots of good questions, but I think you're off the hook.
Thank you.
Mr. Clark, for Community Development.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Going to end with community development tonight. We've got 9 different budget divisions that we're going to quickly go over with you in several different departments, and we'll do our best to kind of continue with your brain dump here. I just want to be sure at the beginning to point out that we have some of our staff. You'll see under our list of our CD management team there a new name. Josh Hopkins. He is our park superintendent who starts in about a week. So he replaces Wendy Giordano, who left back in July. So we're very excited to have him be coming to join our team. We also have with us tonight Chad Westbrook. He is our park supervisor and did a bulk of the park's budget work for this meeting tonight. We also have Ken Sandlin, our building official, and Eric Wade, our business operations supervisor. And as we'll talk about a little bit later, the economic development manager is a new position, and we are finished with our interviews and in the process of filling that. So just a quick overview of what we're going to talk about. I'm going to go over the organization similar to my chief colleagues that just preceded me. Go over our 9 different divisions there. Here's what we look like in terms of an organization, a department. We have 28 and a half FTE employees that are in CD right now, and that does include a couple of new ones that we're proposing tonight. Planning, we have underfilled the assistant director position with a principal planner, and then in last year's budget, for those of you that were on the committee may recall, we used the senior planner position to create a housing and neighborhood specialist. So that is reflecting the council's priority on our housing crisis that we're dealing with. So that Amber's been on board for about 7-8 months now and doing a lot of our housing work. So first division, we'll talk about parks. Parks has 3 different capital areas, budget areas: parks maintenance, aquatics, and we also have recreation. So we'll talk about maintenance first. This is funded 84% by general fund And we also have a number of state grants that help out with many of the capital projects in parks. Total recommended FTEs here under 10.3. So we do a lot. We do a lot with a few people, is a theme that you're hearing here. In terms of park maintenance, there's over 200 acres of improved parkland, and that doesn't include about 7 to 8 acres of right-of-way, such as the E&F confluence area that has kind of that nice median area, the parkway along that wall there. You know, there's a lot of other maintenance areas that we take care of beyond the 200 acres that are, you know, your traditional parks that you might think of. There's a number of other special purpose areas that we have, like the skate park, Caveman Pool, Baker Park. So there's a lot there to care for. And that's why you see the big number there under personnel, a little over $1 million that we have. In the National Parks and Rec Association, they track nationally what are the recommended FTEs based typically on population. And for communities that are between 25,000 and 50,000, that's around 26 FTEs. Now, obviously, we're not at that high end. We're at that 38,000, 39,000. But with that number, we have you know, a lot of need. I think we're doing a good job at maintaining what we have. But the increased demands with the houseless situation is having an effect. So we are, through this budget, asking for 2 FTEs. There you see one of the differences there, 195,000. We do think we can find some room for some savings on materials and supplies, so we've dropped that a little bit. So about 2.9 million total on this maintenance budget. Just a little bit more detail on the contractual. We have a number of different areas that we cover under that: janitorial, trash can disposal. One that I wanted to point out that's a little bit new this year with police, we are looking at moving for our security cameras that cover a number of our parks to have a contractor come in and basically help monitor those, install those. So we're working closely with police on that. We also have temporary staff. We have $10,000 to assist with duties, trails, new parkland. And then our big item under janitorial that we have companies that we hire out to really care for most of our brick and mortar restrooms and janitorial other needs there. So moving on to Aquatics. Aquatic services, the smallest of our 3 parks divisions in terms of budget. This is almost entirely general fund. Just a small amount coming in through fees on this. We have the personnel, we have 8% of 2 of our municipal service workers is dedicated to Caveman Pool. And then we have about 4% of our park supervisors' time. Then that's to assist the YMCA, which is handling all the operational side. They hire all the lifeguards, things like that. But all of the maintenance responsibilities for Caveman Pool are on our city park staff. Recreation services. This is one of the bigger changes this last year. Recreation Northwest had been the city's rec contractor for more than 22 years. And Molly and her daughter decided that they wanted to retire and do some other things. So rather than going out for a different contractor for recreation services, we took that in-house. And that is a lot going on there, but a couple of the main functions with our recreation area, we have 13 shelters that are scattered throughout our park system. So all of the reservations for those shelters are done through our recreation. We also have a number of large group events, reservations, so working very closely with people like the Corvette Club and Shakespeare in the Park is happening this year. So working with them, the Master Brand, their company has a very large event. So, you know, examples like that happen through recreation. We're also looking forward to having movies in the park come back, which has been absent during COVID. So this is the new position, which is the full-time. Julia is our recreation coordinator, and then we have a half-time recreation assistant that also falls underneath this division. And here's just how that comes out in terms of the numbers. This was a recommendation actually in 2017. We had a third-party audit done, and they actually recommended that the city bring rec services in-house. So, so this is the big change that you see under contractual. The contract that we had for Recreation Northwest was $130,000 to handle all of our rec services. So there you see the difference of $111,000 reduced there, but an increase in personnel above. So moving on to our Economic Development Division, Downtown Development Services. So if you read through the city manager's budget message and read through the budget and the strategic plan, you'll see that, you know, downtown plays a big part in so many ways for this community. The historic district is a significant tourism draw, so we do end up putting, you know, a lot of resources down there. In the past, the Public Works facilities staff have, in essence, you know, subsidized our downtown services work. And when we say downtown services, you know, we're really kind of talking about the central business district, you know, that core, and everything that goes with that, from trash to, you know, lighting to dealing with all of the parking lots that are down there. So this is two big changes here. One, we hired an economic development specialist that started a few weeks ago, who's going to be located at the Welcome Center. And so a portion of these services are going to be provided by that new individual, by James. You heard the chief mentioned earlier, there are two half CSO positions that provide downtown services work. Those are funded out of this budget, as well as one full-time maintenance person, facilities person, who they don't work for community development. They work for Jason's team in facilities, but we are funding that individual through this budget. A few other just highlights for downtown development services. These are some of the featured activities that are in the strategic plan, council's strategic plan. Alley activation, creating a permanent plaza downtown. This is one of the focuses of the newly formed Central Business District Vitalization Task Force that has had just 2 meetings so far. And then a few other items there. The Welcome Center facade and improvements is another main activity that we've been focused on. So this is how that budget plays out. The personnel services decrease is really due to that realignment of staffing that I talked about earlier between public works and community development. And then we have the supply, other categories that are used for maintenance of signs and bike racks and water fountains and other features, amenities like that. So this is about a $580,000 proposal for FY23. I think the only one I'm going to call out on this slide is that second one, the flower basket contract. Hopefully you've all seen those flower baskets. They are a very attractive, nice feature for our community on 6th and 7th Street primarily. In the past, we have purchased them through Four Seasons Nursery, but we have done all of the watering ourselves in terms of city staff, which is a big job, going through pretty much every day to keep those watered. So Four Seasons actually agreed this year to take on that watering job. So we have some staff that are glad they don't have to get up at 4:30 in the morning to go do that. But that is reflected in this, this number here under contractual services. You see that went from 176,000 last year to 273,000 this year, and that's really the main reason for that. Here is moving on to another part of economic development. Beautiful building, Northwest Design. This is over on J Street, one that I think a lot of people don't necessarily see because it's kind of tucked a few blocks off. But we wanted to highlight this one because our BRAG grant program and System Development Charge grant program provides incentives for new businesses who want to expand, and which is exactly what Northwest Design did. They came in and applied for a grant and used some of that to make some significant improvements to this building. So here are some of the main activities. Economic development, as you probably well know, is really about relationships. It's about connecting grants passed to a number of resources that are out there, whether that's regional resources for business expansion or relocation, or whether that's existing businesses that are wanting to expand, and how do they do that? So we spend a lot of time and energy focused on involvement with a lot of the organizations that are listed on this slide. And Susan Searider, who was our business advocate for 6 years, retired in January. So this is where we restructured this division a little bit, and instead of having one business advocate position, we have now an economic development specialist that focuses on kind of the downtown and committee on public art. And then we also have an economic development manager position. And so a lot of the networking and building those strong relationships when it comes to other business incentives are going to be done by that individual. Here's some of the specific hard costs that we see happening under economic development. So READY, which is the Southern Oregon Economic Development Incorporated, we were one of the founding members of that group. They provide a number of different services for us, so we have a membership fee there of $27,000. The Small Business Development Center has a new director this last year, Ruth Swain, and is increasing some work through them. So we also have $25,000 that we contribute to them. And then the Business Retention and Expansion Survey, that's a unique cost that we see for this coming year. It's done about every 3 to 5 years. And that's a really helpful survey that looks at 120 to 150 businesses with individual interviews that are done with those. So we're going to be contributing some funding to help with that. Most of the funding, the revenue for these comes through lodging tax, as well as urban renewal funding. So the increase there of $77,000 that you see on that personnel services is really coming from those two sources. Some increase in the lodging tax that went from 9% to 12% about a year and a half ago. So that we're seeing some increased revenues there. And then we see a move from the Urban Renewal Agency also into this to help pay for the economic development manager's salary. The contractual and professional services we've dropped mainly because of the increased workload that we see the economic development manager being able to perform for us. Moving on to tourism. So 28% of the net transient lodging tax money goes now to the Travel Grants Pass. Happy, as many of you probably know, Tori Middlestat. She's the new executive director for Travel Grants Pass. She started about 7-8 months ago. And this destination marketing organization is doing a lot of tourism work now that the city would have been doing. So 28% of all that lodging tax money now goes basically channeled through the city to them. That includes, everything from advertising, publicizing, conducting strategic planning, all the marketing that's involved with large tourism events, things like that. And this is kind of what that lodging tax revenue looks like. I mentioned earlier that increase from 9% to 12% that happened in 2021, quarter one of 2021, and you can kind of see that blue bar there, which is the 2021 totals being an increase in each of the quarters. So it's made quite a difference. The tourism division is 100% funded through TLT dollars, and the economic development specialist, about 50% of that individual salary is funded through this, and then about 8% of my time. We also have a $200,000 transfer out happening here to the Welcome Center to help pay for some of those improvements there. CD management and support. So this is our center if you come into the second floor on community development and you walk in there, you'll see two of our assistants, and Eric Wade is manager of that. So this includes those two, Eric and myself, in terms of staffing. So the number of things that they're doing is vast, but I did want to call your attention to the last bullet, which is support the functions of the Urban Area Planning Commission, Historical Building and Sites Commission, Parks Advisory Committee, and Housing Advisory Committee. So these are just a few of the 11 different committees, citizen committees that the city has active. And so the volunteers that are on these committees are getting packets, they're getting agendas, room reservations are made. There's just a lot that goes into helping make them successful citizen committees, and so we're proud to be able to support them. This is a relatively flat year here, really not a lot of difference. We're just kind of holding the line on most of this. Two more to go. We got planning division and building divisions left. So planning division, a lot of what the planning division does is mandated through the state of Oregon. As you well know, there's a very robust land use program that Oregon has. So everything from the amount of time that we have to process a land use application, to housing production strategies, to how comprehensive plans are updated, it's all essentially mandated that we do these things. So you'll see a lot of that time there. The Community Development Block Grant is also a significant part of what we get between $380,000 and $450,000 each year through HUD for that program. So as I mentioned, here's some of the main activities the Planning Division does. Last year was the highest number of applications processed by the city. When we're talking about applications in this division, we're talking about subdivisions, partitions, special permits, variances, a lot of site plan review. So all new commercial buildings have to come in, again, a state requirement. So last year was a busy year. In 2022, it's proving to be another pretty active year. We have 53 applications just in the first 4 months that have come through. So we have 5 FTEs in the planning division, and here's how that budget comes out. The mostly step and COLA increases in terms of that difference on the personnel item. We are continuing to use temporary contract to help fill out our principal planner role, which we have had unfilled for a while. And then a lot of the contractual work is done completing things like our wetlands analysis. The council has put a high priority on the urban growth boundary rezone, and so we have a traffic impact analysis that we're doing for that. So that's another contract that falls under that contractual line. And then the hearings officer, we have a lot of text amendment work. So those are some of the other contractual expenses. Building and safety. So we have a division here that also has a proposed new salary, a new FTE for this coming year. Doesn't have any impact on the general fund. This is a 100% self-funded division through the permits. Everything from all the inspections. Here's a list of those. We last year did 6,121 inspections. Those are done through this division. There's a couple of decreases that you see there in terms of the single-family permits. That's offset a little bit with some increase in multifamily housing, which isn't reflected on this slide. On the commercial side, we have seen the Spears Center. That's a $4 million or an $8 million project that went through last year. Another big one that we currently are working on is for Options. You heard the chief mention a contract with them. So Options is looking at a new structure over near the Y interchange. So we have, as I mentioned, the addition of one building inspector, plans examiner that is proposed. That's the difference, as well as the COLA increases that you see under personnel services. And then we also have a big need in the building division for application scanning. So we actually have this year a $40,000 projected cost to scan the archives that we have of permits and applications and get those digitized. So that's going to all be done by a third-party contractor. So that's another piece of that $30,000 increase under professional services that you see. And here's our summary. We're looking at about an $8.4 million budget without the contingencies, the significant contingencies that are built into the building division. We have just a number of things that are happening, which I went over, that the downtown events, as well as the increase with the TLT dollars. That's another big part of that increase that you see in terms of the contingencies. So, and that's what we have for you for community development.
Thank you, Brad. Any questions? Rob?
Thanks, Brad. Small question on, and you don't necessarily have to go back to slide 10, but is Parks Aquatics, it seems like total requirements are down about 12%. I'm just not sure why, how is it that we're going to be running the pool for less than we've done it in the past?
Sure, and maybe I'll ask Chad to come up if he has other input after what I have to say, but I think most of that, we do have some chlorine that is, we think that we purchased last year that's already covered, that's dropping some of those expenses for materials. Honestly, I think we just over budgeted. I think it was a little bit high the last couple of years. There's no decrease in the level of service that we're expecting. That's really just a reflection in dropping it a little bit to reflect what's actual expenses have been over the last couple of years, and then that some of the chemicals that are used, since we already have an inventory.
The chemicals are the smallest dollar on the page, but the personnel services were down 50%. You're saying that's just basically due to over budgeting in prior years.
Right. We also, we have, 8% of the 2 municipal service workers, and we think that that's plenty of time since YMCA is, handling the majority of it. So I think that's what that is. Yep.
Other questions? Gordon?
Under Grant Pass Tourism, I notice your contractual services have gone up over $500,000. Would you kind of walk through that again, please?
Under tourism, you said?
Yeah, tourism, your contractual services have gone from 780 to 1.3.5 million.
Sure. So that is the new destination marketing organization, Travel Grants Pass, that the nonprofit was formed, about a year and a half ago, and now that we're starting to, with their new executive director, and they're starting to actually ramp up. That's basically the amount of money that we're transferring from the city to the DMO.
Other questions? Go ahead, Tripp.
Yeah, could you walk us through the process by which we arrived at an 85-15 split between general fund allocations and fees in the planning department? Maybe I'll ask that in a more leading question. It seems very much like we probably would budget, okay, here's the department's needs in terms of FTEs, contractual support and all that, and then here's the city's fee structure, and here's our forecast for how many permits we're going to process in the coming year, and then subtract, fees times permits from need to get to, here's what we need to allocate into this from the general fund. Is that approximately kind of how it went?
More or less, as part of that $2 million reduction exercise that Aaron mentioned earlier, one of the things that council asked planning to do was to increase our revenues by about $100,000 so that we could add $100,000 of planning fees into that. So that we did look at our 11 highest generating applications in terms of volumes, and those fees essentially doubled last year. So that is a bit of an increase in terms of the fee percentage that you see versus last year's budget. But otherwise, it's a crystal ball exercise when it comes to land development. We're so dependent on what happens with the macro economy. So we do our best to estimate what that's going to be in terms of fee revenue. But
so in that fee structure, do we charge developers our costs? So say a developer challenges a ministerial decision that's not, by one of you or your employees, that's not in their favor, and then appeals to the city council for like more political decision on the matter. Do we charge them additional fees for that appeal if they're unsuccessful?
We do.
Okay.
We do. Yeah, there's a separate appeal application fee that is charged.
Tom?
My question is also about planning fees, so thank you. There's been a steady increase in the number of permits, and you reported that, and revenue has been going up with the same number of staff, quite an increase in productivity. But then the forecast is for a decline in planning fees. Are you anticipating a downturn?
Well, it's always best to be somewhat conservative with these things.
I understand.
We were surprised, honestly, with COVID. I think everyone was expecting, but if you talk to the contracting community, if you've tried to get an electrician or a plumber to come to your house recently, they're very backed up. They're all very busy. In terms of subdivisions and the actual creation of new lots, we do see a reduction in the last few months compared to the last 5 years. We did look at that data in terms of what's in the pipeline, in the last few months here. So is that related to a surplus in terms of the number of lots that have been preliminary platted the last couple of years that haven't fully been built out? Maybe. I think there's also just some reservation that we're seeing on behalf of some landowners.
Brian?
Yeah, thank you. Sorry I was late. So with public safety and with parks, there's 3 new FTE that are going to be supported by the general fund. And last year we went through that budget exercise to freeze and cut positions. And so I'm just trying to understand where and how we have the money now to add staff when we were cutting staff last year.
Well, I think it's a bigger sort of macro question that, maybe can be better addressed by the city manager. But I mean, from our side, in terms of the need, I mean, we requested it a couple of years ago. We didn't last year, and now we're coming back. But I think, it's it balances. We figured out a way to, cut back some other costs. But that's in terms of getting those 2 municipal service workers funded, we have it in there. I think it's an overall general fund, I would say, more than it is just a Parks Division issue.
So I know Adam's also online. I can address that question. We did address a similar question earlier, and I don't know if Adam, you want to talk about that, or you want me to go ahead and take the lead on it?
Yeah, I can try and answer that and provide a little more detail to Councilor Auger's question at the beginning of the evening. Can you hear me okay, first of all?
Yes.
All right, so the exercise of identifying up to $2 million of either additional revenues or service level reductions within the general fund was to allow the general fund to be able to remain within fund balance policy at least through the term of the current 3-year public safety levy. Now, because the current public safety levy actually failed in November of 2020, and because we were having the conversations on which service levels to reduce, fiscal year 21 actually realized some significant savings itself because of that discussion, in addition to the savings that were realized in FY22. So those service level reductions and new revenues, in a way, gave you about a year and a half worth of savings, which increased our general fund balance, which makes it more likely that we will be able to continue the services, and even in this case, increase the services or improve the services while still staying within fund balance policy. So this year we're looking to be at about 35%. Last year, that percentage was 38, 39%. So even looking at that trend, we'll still be in fund balance policy even through fiscal year 2024. And as Aaron mentioned earlier in the night, that same conversation will definitely need to happen again at some point in the future, with the same requirements being we either need to reduce service levels and thereby reduce expenditures, or find new revenues to make up that difference. So I believe that should answer at least most of the question.
Yes, thank you for that clarification. So I just want to make sure that I'm understanding correctly. There are a lot of pressures on the general fund. We now have the ability to add these positions that are funded from the general fund. However, that will slowly draw down our contingency. So it is not a sustainable solution to be adding these positions without a change in level of service later or increased revenue later. But on our current path, these positions will not be fundable long-term. Is that accurate?
That is accurate. I would also say that even if we didn't add these additional positions, that statement would still be true. It would just be true further out into the future. So yes, adding these positions does draw down our fund balance more rapidly than not having those positions. But either case, we would need to have that same discussion at some point in the future.
Thank you.
Go ahead. So, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Tripp.
So I just kind of had an immediate follow-up on that. Considering that there is a horizon in there with these FTE ads, it's just a matter of policy. How comfortable in terms of number of years are we comfortable hiring someone for? If all we're looking at is, okay, through the end of this horizon that we're currently budgeting, which is basically fiscal year 24, that's 2 years worth of FTE for somebody with presumably a mortgage to pay and kids to feed. So I mean, how far out in the future do we need to see the budget stability to be comfortable putting someone in that position?
Well, I think we link it back to level of service and council direction in trying to meet those obligations through the resources that we have available. So a year and a half from now, 2 years from now, when we're having to have another discussion about trying to link the level of funding with the level of service, that may not necessarily have a discussion on the two newer parks FTE. That's all going to be decided based on the level of service as established by council. And it could be that parks a year and a half from now is held strong, but we may be looking at another general fund operation to make up that difference.
Josh?
So I think that cliff might be coming a lot faster, at least just kind of looking, I'm not a budget expert, but I'm sitting here looking at the development department, and it looks like in 2024, for the projected numbers, we're looking at anywhere, one place it's $600,000 drop, another place it's a $7 million drop. This is page 33 and 34. And it just feels like there's a very large cliff kind of sitting here, particularly in this department, when all other departments are either flat funded or just increasing a little bit year over year. So I guess my first question here, and I'm sorry, I'm going to have a lot of questions in this section. My first question here is, why is there such a discrepancy between the projected 23 numbers on these pages and then a drop significantly in 2024?
Just to clarify, you're talking on page 33 and 34 of the budget book? Okay.
Let me get there with you. I guess mine don't have those same page numbers. You're looking at planning.
No, if you look at it's the funding matrix financial summaries, it's in the big thick, yeah, he's got it.
There we go.
This is Adam. If I could ask a clarifying question, which category were you saying was decreasing?
So on page 33, if you look at total development, you will see that it moves from $4.8 million down to $4.1 million. Then on page 34, it says total development towards the 3/4 down. It has $6.4 million down to $5.7 million. It is the only departments that I see where you see such a reduction. So I'm just curious to know why that is. Is there an outlay that's going on that accounts for all that movement? It was something that jumped out at me when I was looking at the books.
Yeah, so starting on page 33, the first line under development is building and safety beginning balance. This whole entire page, page 33, is resources or revenues. Based on the current trends of revenues and expenditures, it is looking like our expenditures will be greater than our revenues starting now and through FY23, which means that we'll be drawing down on that restricted fund balance specifically for public safety. So that makes FY24 have fewer resources for development than it does starting in FY23. Of course, again, that's budgeting very conservatively on revenues and budgeting for full expenditures. Whenever you look at page 34 under development, the biggest item there showing a decrease is within tourism promotion, going from 1.5 million to 1.2 million. And that is because we're projecting that FY23 will start the year with, just from memory, somewhere around $300,000 to $400,000 of extra resources from lodging taxes. So we're starting with more in FY23 than we likely will have in FY24. So that's the biggest items I see there, in addition to the building and safety ending balance being very much tied to what you see in the beginning balance is that ending balance is going to go down. So that's why development is seeing some decreases in 24 compared to 23.
Thank you very much. And that actually leads me to my next question here. So you see that $300,000 drop in the tourism side. Where exactly is that money going?
So there's
So that is.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Brad.
So I think there's about 6 different areas where our tourism money goes. Actually, some of it goes to public safety. Some of it goes to parks. Some of it goes to downtown. Some of it's going to economic development. You know, there's a pretty restrictive ORS on tourism money in terms of how it's allocated, and we have a whole section in the municipal code that kind of breaks down that particular allocation between those 6 or 7 areas. So it you know, from year to year it varies a little bit, but it's going to have all of those are going to be impacted. About 15% police, about 18% parks, et cetera.
So is there a major capital thing that's going on? Is there an increase in a public safety officer that's paying for that $300,000 difference? Is there 1 or 2 things that's driving that, or is it like?
So if I could step in on that, the different allocations to public safety and downtown development and economic development are distributions of the lodging taxes. The tourism division is one of the recipients of those lodging taxes. As Bradley mentioned earlier, 28% of all of the lodging tax proceeds gets passed on to our destination marketing organization. And that expenditure actually comes out of the tourism division because ultimately it's providing the service of tourism promotion. That does leave several $100,000 of additional funds available within the tourism division that still must be spent on appropriate items for tourism promotion, or could potentially be transferred for eligible capital projects, but that's not been identified at this moment. So this tourism budget is ultimately allowing for maximum flexibility for eligible uses of those funds, just based on the amount of lodging tax dollars that we're going to have available within the tourism division. It is not at all staff saying that we're definitely going to spend all of these funds. It's just giving council the flexibility to direct those funds where they deem most appropriate.
Okay, so sorry, one more clarification piece here. So it says here tourism beginning fund balance is at $334,000, and it will drop down to $10,000 for 2024. Why, I guess, and where's that money?
Yeah. So that, like I said, is just budgeting for maximum flexibility. That is not saying that we have not identified at this point what those funds will be spent on. But if they are identified, then this budget provides the ability to do that. Otherwise, if not spent, then it'll end up being ending fund balance, which will carry over into a future year. So it's very much a flexibility strategy.
Okay, thank you. Kind of sort of understand it, so I'm trying here. Can we go to a slightly different department, and that is the building and safety department? I see here that you've got contingencies at $1.7 million. Can anybody tell me what that means? Like, everything's contingent.
Sure. Why don't we have Ken come up? He's our building official, and can shed a little bit more light on that.
So the money that is held in building is a dedicated fund that can only be used for building department services, and that's by statute. So over the years, we have budgeted extremely conservative to try to maintain a healthy fund balance so that whenever we run into a downturn in the economy, we actually can maintain services. And part of the reason for that is that a lot of the times our money is collected up front whenever permits are issued. So we still have to provide the service for those permits even after potentially we have a downturn for for resources. The last economic downturn we had $1.7 million in reserve funds at that point in time in 2008, and we drew that all the way down to $400,000. And that was also, we were given $150,000 by council over a 3-year period at $50,000 per year, which we have repaid at this point. And that was with severe cuts in staffing and budget numbers. So I've always tried to budget extremely conservative, to, hopefully, hopefully we can maintain our budget and maintain a healthy fund balance. I know that right now it's quite high. We're looking at increasing some services now that will take that down some, so.
Thank you. So I do have kind of a comment on this particular department as well. So one of the things that in my job I've been lucky enough to do is kind of bounce around the Oregon and Southwest Oregon and get into different communities. And one thing that I've continually heard is that people get frustrated when they're dealing with the planning department here or building codes and things like that, because it's not necessarily completely uniform. They feel like they're willing to pay more money to go to a different place as opposed to coming to Grants Pass or Josephine County. It's really a Josephine County problem. And I guess I wanted to just say that I see here that you've got a little bit of money for contractual professional services, but I think whatever we can do to raise more unification around our building codes folks, making sure that they are trained up and that there is a very even keel group of folks who are really enforcing everything uniformly is going to be vitally important to the long-term sustainability of our communities. So I wanted to make sure that, we are really investing heavily in the people that are doing this work so that they are giving the best public service possible, so that we can move that growth number from 1.5 to a higher number, which quite frankly, the community needs the housing. And if we're ready and able to make it as easy as possible, if we make it easy, they will build it and then they will come,
So the only thing that I could speak to would be the building side. And that's, basically it's structural permits, plan review, plumbing, electrical, mechanical permits, which are basically, it's through state statute, the state of Oregon is the only person that adopts codes. And so it's uniform throughout the entire state. It's the same codes. All the staff that we have right now are very highly trained as far as on state levels. We have a journeyman plumber that's our A-level plumbing inspector that's certified in med gas also. So we have in-house folks that are actually very trained. But again, I can only speak to the building department. So hopefully this new position will give us a little bit more capacity in the future. We've been running very lean for many years just from what happened at the downturn in the economy last time.
No problem.
The only other thing I might add, if I could, Chair, in terms of the speed at which we process permits, we have done that analysis on a regional and it's, I think we're right there as fast, if not faster than most. But yeah, I think Ken's right. I mean, it's we are enforcing the state's codes as well as Roseburg and Medford, and we're all doing that. But we'd be curious to pick your brain a little bit more on that.
No other questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you, Brad.
Thank you.
So at this point, if there's anyone in the audience that has questions, this is the time to ask them. Seeing none of that, do we have any general questions or information requests from the committee? Not seeing that, it's time to vote on the tentative budget approval of programs discussed. I'm looking for a motion to approve those programs that were just brought up. We're not going to get far without it. What have we all?
So moved.
Oh, so moved, sorry. Okay, is there a second? Good, Rick, thank you. Okay, those in favor of the programs that were discussed today, please raise your hand.
This is Jason Javeron on the phone, voting yes.
Okay, I think with the ayes had it. So,
Point of order, Chair. Would you mind taking a roll call vote as I do oppose?
I would not mind taking one. Okay, you going to take care of this for me? Brian?
No.
I'm sorry, Vanessa?
No.
Okay,
Yes.
Tammy? Yes?
Yes.
Okay,
I'm going to abstain.
you can abstain. Okay, Rob?
Yes.
Tripp?
Yes.
Rick?
Yes.
I'll vote yes if it gets to a tiebreaker. Okay, Gordon?
Yes.
Linda?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Joel?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, online? Okay, you already said
Yeah, Chair.
yes.
Yes, Jason Javeron, yes, yes.
I don't have the exact number, but I'm positive it was passed. Do you have the number, Karen?
Yes, you definitely have a majority
Okay.
to pass.
All right. So this is, I'll just bring this up again. If you're going to go on the Capitol tour on Thursday, be sure you tell Karen, because that's how they decide to make enough sandwiches so everybody gets to eat a brief lunch or dinner, whichever.
And then also a motion to continue the hearing to May 12th.
Okay, can we get a motion to continue the motion, pardon me, the meeting to the 12th, Thursday? That's a pretty benign motion.
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second? Thank you.
Second.
Okay. Hand vote, okay? Those in favor? Excellent, thank you.
Thank you.
We did it.